Session 10D is entitled DataOps, the Foundation for Enterprise Intelligence. DataOps. DataOps is a term that we've all heard a lot about over the last couple of years, and I'm sure a number of us have ideas in terms of what it is and what its benefits are. But I'm sure there's also a lot of us who really haven't a clue yet as to what it's all about. And here to put everything in perspective for us is Stewart Bond. Stewart is the research director for IDC. He's focused a lot in this particular area, and his session is going to examine the discipline of data ops in the context of enterprise intelligence. And he's going to look at what IDC have found in terms of a lot of their research, both quantitative and qualitative research, to look at the levels of adoption and illustrate the benefits of data ops and expose the challenges as well. So this is a really timely topic. I'm sure everyone that's on the line is really looking forward to this. And with that, I want to hand over to you, Stewart. We're eager to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Derek. Can you see my slides okay? My screen?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. What exactly is data ops? At IDC, we define it as a combination of technologies and methods with a focus on quality for consistent and continuous delivery of data value. Data ops is not just a story about technology, but it's a story about technology, people, process, and of course, data. Today, I'll put data ops in the context of the modern data environment and the need for a healthy data culture to help you rethink how to define and invest in enterprise intelligence. It's an honor and privilege to be speaking at this event again this year. I've been in the IT industry for over 30 years in roles from application database developer to IT architect, working with organizations around the globe. And now I'm IDC's worldwide analyst focused on researching the worldwide data integration and data intelligence software market. I cover everything from ETL, ELT to master and metadata management, data catalogs, and lineage software. My job at IDC is to track software vendors in this market, watching what new products are emerging, what business and technical problems these products are solving for their customers, and also how much money vendors are making, so I can publish market shares, forecast, and follow the money and publish trends reports on what's going on in the market. Now, as a part of the larger IDC team, I contribute a data integration and intelligence perspective to research in a practice we call the future of intelligence, which is really helping organizations build strategies to become learning enterprises built on evidence-based cultures. It's through my research that I've seen the practice of data ops emerge in the context of what we call enterprise intelligence. In our session today, I'll leverage IDC evidence in the form of survey data and information gathered from discussions with data leaders around the globe. Take a look at the expectations senior leaders have for leveraging data in their organizations. I'll then balance that with the reality of how people are actually using data in their communications and their decision-making. Data and how we work with it has been transformed. And I'll discuss this transformation and the characteristics that define the new technology and work environments we're in today. And this is where data ops emerges and how it's a part of this transformation. We'll then discuss an emerging architectural framework that is providing a backbone for data ops. And lastly, it's not just about technology, but it's also about the people. We'll discuss what makes good data culture and how organizations with good data culture are achieving better business outcomes. Do you remember doing this as a kid? I sure do. I've taken to doing a lot of walking during the last 18 months. including walking on rainy days. I often see a lot of puddles in my path. No, I don't still do this, but some days I wonder if it might be fun. However, I've seen a lot of families out for a walk not long after it's rained, and the toddlers are naturally drawn to the puddles despite their parents' pleas to not get wet. As data professionals, are we still drawn to puddles? I find it interesting that during Randy's CDO panel discussion yesterday, this analogy of data to rain was used by one of the CDOs. In a recent call I had with a manufacturing company, their VP of IT in charge of data started the conversation by saying, we can't even start to think about data lakes because we have a data puddle problem. As I and my fellow market research analysts at IDC who were on that call thought about the comment, we realized that puddles are a great analogy for the realities of modern data environments. Have you ever found puddles to be evenly distributed, or found two puddles that have the exact same circumference, depth, and water clarity? My guess to your answer would be no. Now, puddles aren't usually connected to each other, or perhaps they were before they got smaller due to evaporation into clouds. Ever found one cloud that looks exactly the same as the other? You know, we could go on and on with this analogy, but let's stop here. But the same applies to the modern data environment. Yes, we have data streams, we have data lakes, we have warehouses, and now we have lake houses. But as we explore and discover insights, create applications, and build pipelines, somewhere along the path, we've had to deal with puddles. Perhaps we've even played in them. Now, what do executives expect of data and how people in their organizations work with data? Based on the results of a 2020 or 2021 IDC survey on the topic of data culture, 87% of CXOs want to have an intelligent enterprise. Enterprise intelligence, let me give you a definition here. It gives organizations the ability to make better strategic, tactical, and operational decisions. And to be truly intelligent, enterprises need to leverage investments made in technology, focus on their people, and build a culture around becoming more data-driven in their day-to-day lives. 83% of executives believe there's a need to be more data-driven now than prior to the pandemic. Now, starting in the middle of March 2020 until the end of September, IDC surveyed IT decision makers around the globe every 2 weeks to measure how the pandemic was impacting IT spending, strategic and tactical initiatives. These surveys continue to be run, but we're running them on a monthly basis. And in 2021, we're focused on how IT is changing during this period of recovery as organizations build for resiliency. Because COVID-19 wasn't the first significant economical disruption, and it won't be the last. From the second wave of surveys in 2021, we see that even the board of directors are taking an interest in data and decision-making as they seek to remain competitive and plan for future resiliency. The same sort of data culture, in the same set of data culture survey respondents told us that there are some high expectations placed on practitioners in mid to upper management on the use of data in decision-making. 62% of practitioners and 75% of mid to upper management resources are expected to make data-driven decisions. But in reality, we learned that only a third or less of people are actually being asked to communicate with data, are able to question KPIs and metrics, and admit that their actions are driven by data analysis. Obviously, we've got some gaps between expectations and reality, or the ability to be data-driven and truly become an intelligent enterprise. So what is blocking our path? Why do we have these issues? You know, how many puddles are in our way or are distracting us? Well, 50% of people say they're overwhelmed by the amount of information available. They can't find that signal in the noise or the nugget of insight within the vast amount of information that's available to them. But interestingly, make decisions. How can this be? You know, we've seen a transformation in the characteristics of and use of data. When the term big data first emerged, it was defined by the 3 V's, the volume, variety, and velocity. Now, there isn't as much talk about big data anymore. Instead, what was called big data is being subsumed by a larger and broader notion of leveraging all kinds of data together, regardless of where it's located. As a consequence, data is now characterized as being highly distributed, diverse, and dynamic. Let me throw some data at you for this. Distributed, 63% of organizations are actively migrating data to the cloud, and 95% of organizations are integrating data across hybrid cloud environments. Diverse, 77% of organizations are integrating up to 5 different types of data in pipelines and up to 10 different types of data management technologies. Dynamic, well, 44% of organizations are ingesting streaming data into DataOps pipelines, but 94% have stream processing software. It tells us there's going to be a lot of growth in this area in the use of streaming data. But it's not just data flowing faster. Data is also dynamic because it continuously changes. These 3 Ds are really getting in the way of achieving enterprise intelligence, but unfortunately, enterprise intelligence cannot be achieved without these 3 Ds. Now, not only is the data distributed, diverse, dynamic, but so are the people that work with data. Last year, I introduced attendees at this conference to a new generation of data native worker, Generation Data, or Gen D for short. People in Gen D are not just those that have data in their title, but it includes many other roles distributed throughout the organization, all part of the data culture. Gen D is not a chronological generation, but it's a vocational generation. For some, data is the natural resource that they draw from and manage. For others, it's the medium they work in to create an outcome, or it's the well from which they draw insight and inspiration. Now, it's become clearer that this is a real generation as we speak to more organizations that tell us about who is involved in the data culture. This data and analytics director here provided some insight into how they've deployed data ambassadors throughout the organization. In the data culture survey that I've been referring to, we screened for people that perform data management and analytics functions. The chart on the right illustrates the distribution of the roles that responded to the survey. Clearly, Gen D is distributed, it's diverse. The realities of business requires their roles to also be highly dynamic. Now, there's another symptom of the reality of distributed, diverse, and dynamic data and people that work with that data. Only a third of people believe that their data and analytics groups are meeting business expectations. And we can see from the chart on the right that there's still a lot more time spent in data discovery, preparation, protection, and governance compared to time performing analytics and getting to that insight. This data here aligns with what we've come to know as the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time is spent on data discovery and preparation, where only 20% of the time is being spent on analytics. This data is closer to a ratio of 70-30, so perhaps all of the advances in data and analytics automation is helping and making a dent in this ratio. But not only did we ask people how much time they spend on each of these activities, we also asked how often they were successful. That is, how often were they able to complete the activity in a reasonable an expected amount of time. People believed they're successful on average 50% of the time, which means they're unsuccessful the other 50% of the time. Clearly, a new approach to working with data is needed to overcome the challenges of modern data environments and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of data native workers. We heard it this morning in the keynote presentation. This is where DataOps emerges. And this is how we define DataOps at IDC. It's not just technology. It's not just methods. And it's not just people. It's a combination of all those things for consistent and continuous delivery of data value. And it applies to any data-driven outcome, not just focused on data engineering alone. So what is driving DataOps adoption? We did a survey on people that are doing DataOps, and this is what they told us about those things that are driving their adoption. Look at the top three. Productivity, to address the efficiency issues we just spoke about that were observed in a different survey, in the data culture survey. Data quality, the pandemic uncovered many problems from supply chains to social injustice. It also uncovered data quality issues. Every consumer interaction became digital, and poor data quality resulted in bad customer experiences. How many of you had issues with online orders, curbside pickup, or simply getting what you ordered from the coffee shop based on the order that you placed in the app and getting the order correct? I know I had a lot of problems. They got better as we went further through the year. Now, many organizations knew they had data quality problems before the pandemic. The pandemic amplified those problems, and now it needs to be dealt with. And the third highest decreased the number of errors in data related to data quality that we just spoke about, and in the products that produce or consume data, the applications, the dashboards, the models, the algorithms, and so on. Seeing reduced time to insight and cost at the bottom aren't surprising. As productivity and quality improve, the time to insight should also improve. Organizations also have not yet associated cost savings with DataOps because of the investment in skills, technologies, and process, and changes that will be required to transition to DataOps. Every fall, IDC makes a number of predictions across all the areas of IT markets we cover. Here's a prediction we made about DataOps in the fall of 2020 as part of our top 10 data and analytics predictions for 2021. It ties back to how we define DataOps, including the connection to the technology and the people. From our survey that we did after we made this prediction, here's a list in order of importance of the things that have accelerated DataOps adoption over the past 12 to 18 months. The complexity of modern data environments and organizational improvements are influencing the rate of DataOps implementation. The network perimeter is long gone. Security now needs to focus on where the data is, how it's flowing, and what it represents, requiring a more focused effort on securing those data puddles in the pipelines. DataOps is a method that can improve the quality and value of data assets. Cloud migration is increasing data distribution and enabling data volumes to grow to massive scale. Data and analytics technology is also becoming more complex, requiring agile approaches. As the organization seeks to improve, it also needs to improve its ability to make decisions with data. And although agile methods are better served with the team physically together, the need to work remotely actually helped accelerate adoption. Now, considering we did our survey after we made this prediction and seeing the acceleration, we may need to go back and revise it. Okay, so what is the current rate of adoption? How many people are doing DataOps? 85% of respondents said they've been doing DataOps for more than a year. only 11% said they had adopted DataOps within the last 12 months, leaving only 4% saying they were just considering it. Recognizing that we screened out anyone who was not considering or doing DataOps, this number still surprised us because we thought DataOps was a relatively new discipline, or at least what is defined in the DataOps manifesto is relatively new. Now, if we look at the methods used in DataOps, we can hypothesize here that many of those who say they have been doing DataOps for more than a year, since it represents a large chunk of the respondents in the survey, might be doing DevOps for data rather than true DataOps. Sandboxes, version control, build, and deployment automation are all at the top of the list, which, other than sandboxes, are more aligned with DevOps methods. Now, a big differentiation for me in the manifesto of DataOps from DevOps is that it performs continuous testing on data products and the data in the pipelines. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. The fact that data and logic testing is so low on the list again tells me that these organizations may be doing more of a DevOps for data, even though we know testing is also a big part of DevOps. But the fact that they're not doing testing on data and the logic at the same time makes me question that. The better question might be, does whatever these respondents are doing that they believe is DataOps actually making a difference for their organizations? Now, I realize we're at a conference for a very prestigious academic institution, but academic definitions or not, whatever these respondents are doing, they believe is DataOps, is obviously paying off for them. The trend on the right here illustrates the benefits organizations are seeing in the reduction of exceptions. There's been a 44% reduction in the number of times data is breaking applications, a 38% reduction in the number of times applications breaking data, and a 49% improvement in the ability to deliver on time. Now, part of the on-time delivery may be related to the fact that agile practices set better expectations on what can be delivered within short periods of time. But it could also be because efficiencies have actually been improved. I have a quote here from a CDO that I worked with earlier this year who, when he saw this chart, called it my money chart. He reinforces the need to not only test the apps, but also the data. Now, in our survey, we not only asked what is driving and accelerating the adoption of DataOps, we also asked what challenges respondents faced in the implementation of DataOps. Do you notice here how they reflect the drivers of DataOps and the requirements that are actually accelerating adoption? Not surprisingly, security requirements top the list. As data becomes more distributed, it becomes more difficult to control and protect. Budget, as usual, is at the top of the list because nothing comes for free, and spending has been under a much higher level of scrutiny in the past year and a half. Expectations for improvements in quality of deliverables are not being met. Now, implementing DataOps, like anything else, I hate to say it, is like a journey. And these things will improve over time as organizations are able to mature their DataOps practices. Remote work environments have been a challenge for all ops teams, as daily scrums can be more efficient with the team physically together in front of a whiteboard. Changing business priorities it's constant, and we've experienced probably more changes in the past year and a half than we've seen over a period of the last 5 to 10 years. The pandemic wasn't one big event, but it was hundreds or thousands of small events that disrupted business operations around the globe. Our 3Ds of data is reflected here in the distribution and volume challenges, and there's still a lack of resources, skills, and organizational structures that can effectively support DataOps. As with the expectations of quality, this too will improve as DataOps maturity grows. Now, because many of the challenges reflect the drivers and the accelerators of data ops. We'll go back to an analogy of water. You may feel a little bit like a fish trying to swim upstream. You know you have to. The water is the very thing that keeps you alive, but it will be a lot of hard work to overcome the things that are in your way, and knowing that the stream never stops flowing. In these cases, good architectural thinking within a defined framework and a strong data culture can go a long way towards achieving success. I've been wrestling with the use of the terms data fabric and data mesh to describe modern data environments and the solutions that are required to manage highly distributed, diverse, and dynamic data. Fabrics and meshes, yes, they address the interwoven, diverse, and distributed nature of data. But a piece of fabric has limited functionality. So I don't believe it accounts for the functionalities needed to manage and control data and movement of data throughout the enterprise. You know, IDC started using the term control plane to describe a facility for gaining control over the myriad of computing resources available across hybrid and multi-cloud environments. I applied the same concept to the domain of data and came up with the term data control plane. Here's how we define it. It's an architectural layer that sits over an end-to-end set of data activities to manage and control the holistic behavior of people and processes in the use of distributed, diverse, dynamic data. A data control plane should provide for situational awareness, policy management, and a capability to directly regulate behavior, but not restrict organizational enablement with data. The term data control plane, I believe, adds the missing functional characteristics of a fabric or a mesh, and it accounts for the notion of distributed data across the plane of hybrid cloud environments. It contains three layers: an intelligence layer where metadata is continuously harvested, organized, and analyzed to provide the full context of data and data consumption. Intelligence about data feeds the policy engine to control data access and movement within the engineering layer. The engineering layer is where pipelines are built and deployed with functionalities such as ingestion, transformation, replication, virtualization, and cleansing. Data is always moving. It's always changing. And as such, we've seen a term emerge called data observability, which is a capability that continuously monitors the health of the data environment, including the machinery that implements the data pipelines and the data flowing within the pipelines to detect data drift and shift. So let's walk through an example scenario of how the capabilities of a data control plane come to play in a data and analytic use case. Let's say a business analyst is tasked with performing a customer churn analysis. The analyst turns to a data catalog in the intelligence layer of the data control plane to find out if anyone else has done a churn analysis. Discovering nobody else has, the analyst uses the catalog to locate customer, account, order, and interaction data. The catalog provides intelligence about the quality levels of each data set, the timeliness of each data set, and the owner or the steward of that data. Discovering they don't have access to one of the data sets that is needed, the analyst requests access. The data controller checks the access policy and subsequently kicks off a workflow to ask the data owner for access approval. Once approval is given, the analyst creates a sandbox, performs an ad hoc preparation of the data to build a model and perform the requisite analytics. The analyst then works with the data engineering team to operationalize the data ingestion, transformation, cleansing, and model it into a pipeline using DataOps methods to deliver a high-quality solution. Data products within the newly created pipeline are added to the catalog, so the next time the next analyst who needs to do a churn analysis can leverage what already exists and doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. Data in the pipeline is observed for drift and shift And as changes occur, the pipeline is modified to avoid data causing exceptions or delivering incorrect information. There are two questions I get from end users and software vendors. They're the same two questions. One, are organizations implementing this architecture? And two, are there any software vendors that have all of these capabilities in their portfolio? Let me answer these questions with data, because as a member of Gen D, I am evidence-based and data-driven. The answer to are organizations implementing this architecture is yes, but they're doing it in pieces and not understanding how each layer and functionality in the data control plane are related and connected. Perhaps the story on the left is a familiar one to you. The data on the right is probably also familiar. All of these data engineering capabilities are being used. The other issue here is that even the technology itself is highly distributed, diverse, and dynamic. 65% of organizations are using at a minimum 10 different data engineering and intelligence tools. 54% are using one tool for each capability. 33% are using two tools for each capability. And 13% are using 3 different tools for any one capability. 43% of the tooling is commercial software in the cloud, 30% is on-premise, and the remaining 27% is custom code. You know, the data control plane architectural framework, it's intended to help organizations think architecturally when it comes to their data environments. Every architectural decision should be made understanding the implications of that decision on other components, processes, and people. Perhaps this is where the term fabric has some merit. Excuse me. Because in a fabric, everything is woven together and connected. You cannot pull on the fabric in one spot without impacting another part of the fabric. That's better. The answer to, are there any software vendors that have all of these capabilities in their portfolio, is also no. I remember I'm a market analyst. I watch this market. Some have more than others, but not one has everything. This market glance here also brings the lower level data storage and management solutions into the scope of data ops, the operations part of data ops. Now, we published this about a month ago and have had several vendors reach out to us to ask why they're not included. Well, these type of publications are the very thing that bring those startups out of the woodwork, giving us more opportunities to collect data about who else is out there in the market. The point here is that if you're investing in the capabilities of a data control plane, you need to look for solutions with open APIs that will allow interoperability and integration with adjacent capabilities to truly get the value out of the investments that you're making. I now want to try to bring the technology back to the people in the organization through the data intelligence layer, or the layer that provides intelligence about data. It's the metadata that answers the who, what, where, when, why, and how of data. The chart on the right shows us how important intelligence about data is to people in Gen D. Yet, from our DataOps survey, only 1/3 of organizations identify metadata management as a top priority. And metadata management software is the least used tool among all of the respondents, which again represents another gap that organizations need to fill. Data intelligence has its own layer in the data control plane for a reason. It's that important. Providing intelligence for policy and control of data in the governance layer, and providing the necessary context of data in the process of data engineering to make sure the right data is being used at the right time by the right people and for the right reasons. Now, remember that I believe a significant differentiator of DataOps from DevOps is that it tests applications and data separately. Here again is evidence that perhaps what people are doing isn't fully aligned with the DataOps manifesto. Continuous testing of data is critical in our 3D data environments. This is where the observability component in the data control plane comes into play. Continuous testing of data in DataOps tries to stop bad data from being consumed, just as continuous testing of code in DevOps tries to prevent bugs from being deployed in production. As data changes, and it will, it needs to be tested against acceptable tolerances. Not unlike how physical products coming off of an assembly line are tested for tolerance exceptions. I heard Doug Laney refer to this yesterday. Oops, sorry, there we go. Another key differentiator here is that continuous in DevOps describes the motion of dev, test, deployment within sprints. But in DevOps, sprints are measured in weeks or maybe months, whereas data is always changing. So in DataOps, continuous needs to be synonymous with real time, and why data intelligence also needs to be continuous and continuously observed. DataOps is not just about technology, as we've been talking about. Societal culture is defined by people's attitudes, values, goals, and social influences. Data culture is similar, with each pillar revolving around technology that is used to control data. Asking the following questions can give you an idea of how strong your data culture is. Recall our data at the beginning of the session on what is expected of people versus what they're actually able to do. DataOps allows for the ability to fail fast. Experimentation and curiosity should be encouraged. Does the organization systematically track performance across a variety of metrics? Is there data empathy? Can people find help and collaborate with data? And lastly, organizations that expect employees to use data encourage, no, I missed that. It was organizations that expect employees to use data, encourage experimentation, have a stated data mission, measure improvements, and have data empathy and strong data cultures. It's the problem with using animations. You don't always align them correctly. Is data culture important? Why, yes, it is. And I know there's been a few sessions on it here at the symposium. The quote on the left is from a manager of enterprise intelligence, commenting on the results seen after they were able to improve data culture in their organization. Then in a survey, we compared the business outcomes of organizations with a strong data culture against those with a weak data culture. And in each one of these dimensions, those with a strong data culture saw better outcomes. Now, I likely need to explain the chart because the percentages on each line add up to more than 100. The percentages across the lines at the low and the high ends also add up to more than 100%. These were 4 individual survey questions, each asking if improvements had been observed in each of these areas. They had to answer yes, no, unsure, or none of these. The percentages represent the percentage of respondents with weak at the lower end and strong data cultures at the top end who said yes. So if we take faster time to insight as an example, 49% of organizations with a weak or poor data culture said yes, we have realized benefits, leaving 51% saying no. At the other end of the line, we have 66% of organizations with good data culture who said yes, which means only 33% said no. If we look at the actual percentage of improvement, there was a 35% improvement in the number of respondents that said yes to faster time to insight. Remember that our survey respondents didn't see this as a driver for data ops, and yet if data culture is part of your data ops strategy, you can improve. There was a 10% improvement in the number of respondents that said yes to cost reduction, an 11% improvement in the number of respondents that said yes to improving the rate of customer acquisition, and a 28% improvement in the number of respondents that said yes to reducing the time to market. Even small improvements across any one of these dimensions can make a big difference to the bottom line. Improving data culture and becoming more data-driven will require investment, but you clearly have more opportunities to gain than things to lose. Enterprises really must develop a culture in using data, collaborating with data, innovating with data, and make data culture an ingrained part of their identity. So how do we do that? Let's hope the animations work correctly this time. Identify areas in the 5 elements of data culture where you may have gaps. Identify people and departments that are data-driven and make them data champions so they can evangelize the use of data among their groups and demonstrate best practices. Do not be intimidated by data culture. Wherever your organization's starting point is in the journey to becoming a more intelligent enterprise, each step along the way will deliver incremental benefits. Create opportunities to share ideas and best practices. Create forums for ideation and collaboration. And constantly learn from your experiences. Leaders using data set the tone for the rest of the organization. Executives that are data curious inspire their teams to be data savvy as well. Not all benefits are financial. Often the biggest benefits come from better customer and/or employee experiences. More differentiation and being able to be resilient in the face of massive disruption. We are at a conference at MIT. So I want to close off here by asking you to grade yourself on your adoption of data ops in building a foundation for enterprise intelligence. What grade would you give your executives on setting data and analytics expectations? Are you within that 87% that we identified earlier? How would you grade what Generation D roles can actually use data for? Does it align with executives' expectations? And do they have the skills and tools to meet those expectations? Do you know where your data is? Do you know where it came from? Do you know what it looks like? How often it changes? And why? How distributed, diverse, and dynamic is the data in your environment? Where are the Generation D roles located and allocated across the enterprise? How are they governed, trained, and how are they enabled with data? Where is your organization in the adoption of data ops? Has your organization implemented disparate solutions to take control of your data? Or is there an architectural framework in place to work towards a unified data control plane? Do you have a strong or a weak data culture? Business and data leaders who can invest in a broad set of capabilities to continuously improve their enterprise intelligence, will improve business outcomes due to better decision-making. Now, as I conclude, I would like to encourage you to put on a pair of boots, grab an umbrella, perhaps a raincoat, go for a walk in the rain, exploring the distribution, diversity, and dynamics of data streams, lakes, and don't be afraid to jump in the puddles. If you have interest in our data ops, data culture, and enterprise intelligence research at IDC, please reach out to me. Check out the content on idc.com or follow me on social media. Now, what kind of questions did we get and what can I clarify for you today?
Stewart, thank you. Thanks for that enlightening glimpse into some of the research findings that you guys are having. You know, together with not only the analogy of the data puddles, but also, you know, the insight and the thinking around data control planes and how that could be a way of thinking about the future that we're stepping into. A couple of questions are coming through. There's one here specifically from Susan Cook. She says, Stewart, this is awesome. And I would give that one a thumbs up, 100% with you, Susan. Continuing from the discussion of CDO role being part offensive and or offense rather, and part defense, data ops is typically justified for defensive reasons. What suggestions do you have for CDOs to justify data ops on offense, on growth, speed, new opportunities, etc.?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That's a good question. And it's interesting. You're right. Data ops is often looked at on the defense side, but it applies equally to the offense side. Data ops, again, if we look back at the definition, it's about improving the quality of those data products that are being created. Do you want your executives making strategic decisions on growth, on revenue growth, on trying to reduce costs, on trying to increase speed of time to market, on looking for new opportunities? Do you want them making decisions on bad data or poorly created models or algorithms? No, you want them to be making decisions that are based on good data and high quality analytics, right? It's we've done other surveys. I don't have the results in front of me. We've done other surveys. Do you trust the data is one question that you're working with, but do you also trust the analytical models that you work with? And it's interesting to see the juxtaposition between those two things. So, data ops, maybe the operations part of data ops is more about the defense, but data ops applies equally to the offense, in my opinion.
Great, yeah. It seems like whether you are in a growth situation or not, I mean, there's still innovation whether you are defending or going on the offensive, certainly the whole approach of data ops is an innovative approach. It's something that a lot of people haven't been doing terribly well. One of the other questions that we have is about the definition, the fundamental definition of data ops. I've heard it said that data ops really emerged from the confluence of three different things. One was the whole lean approach to leaning out the organization. The other one was from agile, and the third was from DevOps. It was the coming together of agile, lean, DevOps that essentially gave birth to DataOps. What do you think about that as a characterization of some of the fundamental roots of DataOps?
Yeah, I think that's a really good characterization. I've followed Chris Berg and a lot of work he's been doing at Data Kitchen, and certainly read his cookbooks and gotten very hungry as I've read through them. I love his recipes, so a lot of my thinking in this area has aligned with that, and he brings those three things together. And so the big part for me is that statistical process control part of things. It's that measuring, that observability, that continuous testing of the data, as well as the machinery that that makes the pipeline flow. You've got to be able to understand in your pipelines that data can fall within an acceptable tolerance, and when it doesn't fall within that tolerance, something's wrong. If you've got an executive looking at a dashboard that says sales jumped by 10-fold in a certain region of the country yesterday, all of a sudden starts asking all kinds of questions about why, and all kinds of people start getting involved. It's not because it may be because it actually did jump 10-fold, or it might be because a salesperson missed a decimal point as they entered an order into their order fulfillment system, right? So being able to observe the data in those pipelines, I think, and make sure it's falling within acceptable tolerances is a big part of DataOps, and has to be a big part of how people implement. And actually, I think as that becomes more prevalent, people will be even more successful. There'll be an even bigger reduction in the number of times that data is breaking applications.
Right. Yeah, and to that end, maybe there's some kind of readiness for DataOps.
Yes, there should be.
Organizations that are not thinking lean, that have not already started down the agile path, might take longer to actually get it to a situation where they want to start adopting. What have you seen as far as that is concerned?
Have not done any DataOps readiness studies, but I will put that on my list of things to do. But I totally agree that you've got to have a readiness. It's I'm going to draw an analogy to containerization of software. There's a lot of software vendors have containerized their products, and they're cloud native solutions. They're now offering their products in these cloud native containers, but not all of their customers are ready to run containerized solutions, because that requires a whole new discipline of architecture and of operational, IT operations and monitoring, and keeping an eye on what's going. You've got a whole observability requirement there. It's got a whole different way of running your IT business when you're running software in a container environment compared to what we've learned, or where we've come to in terms of virtual machines and that sort of thing. So the same thing is true of DataOps or even DevOps. There's a shift in how you approach things. You can no longer work on things in a waterfall method. You've got to start working on things in sprints. You've got to think about those incremental pieces of value you can deliver to the business, and you've got to start thinking about, I've got to test, and it's not just testing my dashboards, my models, it's testing the data too. And that takes a mind shift, that takes a change in what you're doing. And that's why I think we haven't seen, the full benefits. We haven't seen the improved quality yet, as I talked about, those challenges that people have had. So yeah, there's absolutely a readiness, because there's a whole shift in how you approach, how you work with data. And it's not just working with data in analytics, with the data warehouse, with the lake house, with a lake warehouse, total data, however you want to define it. It's also looking at data within your operational systems, right? How do you improve the use of data as you're doing your procure to pay, as you're doing your order to cash, as you're doing these business processes, you've also got to start applying some of those data ops methods at that level as well, because that's going to change the effectiveness of the business and the outcomes of the business.
Yeah, correct. And actually back to Susan's point, in terms of, going on the offensive. I mean, when you think about going on the offensive, one of the things you got to think about is your operational, the operations of the organization, in terms of how efficient do we operate, how much data is available to the person who is making operational decisions on the shop floor or wherever it's actually happening. And to your point, then it's absolutely critical to think of it not only in the long-term kind of strategic analysis thing, but also minute by minute in the organization, what's happening. So yeah, that's really good food for thought there. I think that pretty much addresses the questions that came up. Stewart, as we kind of close out here, what would your parting thought be to the audience, in terms of the future and what they should take away from this?
I think a lot of the key messages I honed in on, it's not, DataOps is not a technology. When the DataOps term became, really popular overnight, I saw companies who didn't have a DataOps solution to having a DataOps solution, and cloud washing all over, right?
Yes.
So you can't look at it as a DataOps. Sorry, DataOps is a technology-only solution, just like data governance. I started using the term data intelligence a few years ago because I had companies calling me and asking me, where do I buy a data governance solution? Well, you can't. It's an organizational discipline.
Yep.
There's technology that can help you, that can tell you everything you need to know about your data so you can govern it. And for me, that's data intelligence technology, and it's so important. It has a place in that data control plane. So, you can't approach this as a technology-only solution. You've got to, it's going to change how you work with data. It's going to influence your data culture, and your data culture needs to be pervasive throughout the organization. We've seen that in several other sessions this week. We saw it this morning in the keynote. The whole issue of data literacy, that's got to be there. It's so important. So just make sure it's got to be a holistic approach. Now, that being said, as you approach it, you don't need to do a big bang. It doesn't need to be a big bang thing. Start small. Start with something that has a limited number of stakeholders, but also start with something that is business relevant, right? Don't deliver a solution that is irrelevant to the business. Deliver a solution that shows real business benefit, because that's going to give you more investment for continuing the project, continuing the rollout of the solution throughout the organization.
Excellent. Stewart, once again, thank you very much for your insights and the discussion afterwards as well. Gave us a lot to think about, and we wish you well with ongoing research. Look forward to hearing some more next year.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.